In 1978, five close friends went to a basketball game, got in their car to drive home, and instead headed directly into a frozen wilderness. This is Mr. Phantom, and tonight we are covering one of the most psychologically haunting and genuinely heartbreaking unsolved disappearance cases in American history. A case that has no confirmed explanation. A case where 4 men died in the wilderness and 1 man was never found at all. A case where the central question is not simply what happened, but why. Why did 5 men who knew how to get home drive 70 miles in the opposite direction into a snowbound mountain forest? Why did they leave their car and walk into the wilderness rather than stay on a road where they might be found? Why did the 1 man who reached shelter and had access to enough food to survive for months die anyway? And why, in all the years since 1978, has no investigator, no researcher, no theorist been able to produce an explanation that accounts for all of those questions simultaneously? The Yuba County Five is a case that resists resolution, not because the evidence is absent, but because the evidence that exists points in directions that do not connect into a coherent picture. Every answer generates new questions. Every explanation leaves something unexplained. And at the center of it is the most painful question of all, which is what those 5 men experienced in the weeks they spent in the snow and whether any of it could have been prevented. To understand this case, you need to understand who these 5 men were, because they are sometimes described in accounts of this case in ways that reduce them to their circumstances, to their diagnosis, to the fact of their vulnerability. That is not the right way to tell this story. These were 5 people with lives and friendships and routines and things they cared about. Gary Mathias was 25 years old. He had served in the military, which means he had passed the physical and cognitive requirements of military service. He had a history of mental health difficulties that had led to his discharge, and at the time of the disappearance he was doing well, stable on medication, engaged with the supported living program he had joined. He was described by people who knew him as the most capable of the 5, the one most likely to take initiative in a difficult situation. Ted Wyatt was 32 years old. He was physically large and, by accounts, good-natured. He lived with his family and participated in the supported living program as a social outlet. Jack Madruga was 30 years old. He was the one who owned and drove the car. He had a driver's license and was a capable enough driver that he regularly transported himself and his friends to events. Al Huet was 25 years old. Bill Sterling was 29. All 5 of them had mild intellectual disabilities. This is stated in every factual account of the case, and it is relevant to understanding what happened. But mild intellectual disability is not incapacity. It does not mean these men were unable to function in the world. They held jobs, they had relationships, they navigated daily life, they attended sports events and rooted for their team and stopped at convenience stores on the way home. They were people, and they deserved better than what happened to them. The 5 men were involved with a sports program associated with their supported living community. They were enthusiastic sports fans. Their team, the Gateway Gators, played in a league for adults with disabilities, and in February of 1978, the Gators had a connection to a University of California Davis basketball game being played in Chico, California, approximately 90 miles from their home in Marysville. The details of exactly why they attended the UC Davis game rather than a Gateway Gators game have been described differently in different accounts. What is confirmed is that on the evening of February 24th, 1978, all 5 men were at a basketball game in Chico. The home team lost. After the game, the 5 men were seen at a convenience store in Chico. This is the last confirmed sighting of all 5 of them together. They were observed purchasing snacks. Nothing about their behavior at the store was reported as unusual or alarming. They got back into Jack Madruga's 1969 Mercury Montego and drove away. The drive from Chico back to Marysville is straightforward. It takes approximately an hour and a half under normal conditions. The route is not complicated. Jack had driven it before. The men knew where they were going, and then they did not go there. Instead, the Mercury Montego traveled east and then north, away from Marysville, toward the Sierra Nevada mountains, through Oroville, through Feather Falls, into the Plumas National Forest, into mountains that in late February were covered in snow. 70 miles from Chico, on a remote forest road called Bucks Lake Road, the car stopped stopped. It was stuck in the snow. The road was not impassable for all vehicles, but it was impassable for a 1969 Mercury Montego without snow chains or four-wheel drive. The car was not mechanically damaged. The engine worked. The tires were intact. The car simply could not move forward through the snow, and no one drove it back down the road the way they had come. The men got out of the car, and that is where the confirmed facts of what happened to the Yuba County Five largely end. The families of the 5 men began reporting them missing when they did not return home on the night of February 24th. A missing persons report was filed. Investigators were aware that the men had been at a basketball game in Chico and had likely driven Jack's car. The car was the key to finding them, but the search was severely hampered by the weather. February in the Sierra Nevada foothills and mountains means snow, and the winter of 1977 to 1978 was a heavy one in Northern California. The roads into the areas where the car might have gone were difficult to access. The search was conducted, but the conditions made comprehensive coverage of the mountain areas impossible. Weeks passed. February became March. March passed. The families waited. The investigators worked with what they had. On March 5th, 1978, a group of people on snowmobiles found Jack Madruga's car on Bucks Lake Road. This confirmed that the men had gone into the mountains. The car was examined. It was not mechanically failed. It had snow chains in the trunk, which were never put on, meaning the 5 men had the equipment to deal with the snow, but had not used it. The fuel gauge showed the tank was nearly empty, suggesting the engine had been run for a period of time after the car became stuck, most probably for heat. The car being found narrowed the search area, but did not resolve it. The men were not in the car. They were not visible in the immediate area around the car. They had walked into the wilderness. The search was expanded into the surrounding mountains. Nothing was found. The snow was too deep, the terrain too difficult, the area too large. The search continued through March and into spring. And then in June of 1978, as the snowpack melted and previously inaccessible areas of the forest became reachable, searchers found a Forest Service trailer on a remote forest road approximately 19 miles from where the car had been left, 19 miles on foot through the Sierra Nevada mountains in late February, over terrain that would have been snow-covered, steep, and extremely difficult, even for physically fit and experienced outdoor travelers. Inside the trailer, they found Ted Wire. He was dead, but the circumstances of his death were among the most disturbing and most inexplicable aspects of the entire case. Ted Wire had not died quickly. The physical evidence in the trailer indicated that he had survived for approximately 13 weeks after the initial disappearance. 13 weeks is more than 3 months. The basketball game was on February 24th. 13 weeks later is approximately late May. Ted Wire was alive in that trailer for most of the winter and into spring. The trailer contained food. Specifically, it contained military rations, the kind of preserved, calorie-dense food supplies that Forest Service facilities sometimes stock for emergency use. There was enough food in that trailer to sustain a person for a very significant period. Ted Wire had eaten some of it, not nearly enough. He was severely malnourished, and his body showed signs consistent with starvation and hypothermia. There was also a propane heater in the trailer. Matches were present. 8 matches had been used. The heater had been used for some period. Ted Wire had been in a trailer with food and with means of producing heat, and he had died of starvation and cold exposure after 13 weeks. He had lost an estimated 80 to 100 pounds. His feet showed signs of severe frostbite. The trailer was his shelter, and it had everything he needed to survive, and he had not used those resources adequately to keep himself alive. This is the question that sits at the heart of the Yuba County Five case, and that no investigator has ever satisfactorily answered. Why? Why did Ted Wire, alone in a trailer in the mountains, with food available and with heating equipment available, not eat enough to sustain himself? Why did he not use the heater consistently enough to prevent fatal exposure? Was he waiting for someone to come back? Was he too deeply in shock or grief to function adequately? Was he psychologically in a state that prevented him from taking care of himself? Was he injured in ways that limited his ability to access and prepare food? No definitive answer has ever been established. The physical evidence shows that he ate some of the rations. It shows that some of the matches were used, but the quantity of food consumed and the degree of shelter use were not sufficient for survival, and the reason for that insufficiency is unknown. The discovery of Ted Wire in Mathias The trailer prompted an intensified search of the surrounding area. Over the following months, as spring progressed and more snow melted, the other men began to be found. The remains of Jack Madruga were discovered relatively close to the car, suggesting he may not have traveled far from the vehicle before dying. Bill Sterling's remains were found in the wilderness. Al Hewitt's remains were found. The recoveries were made difficult by the terrain and the time that had passed, and the condition of the remains in some cases limited the forensic information available. Investigators examined each set of remains carefully. What they did not find was evidence of foul play. No injuries consistent with violence. No indication that any of the men had been harmed by another person. The deaths were the result of exposure, of the cold and the mountains and the inadequate shelter and the insufficient food and the weeks of physical deprivation in a wilderness environment in winter. But Gary Mathias was not found. Searches of the area around the trailer, around the car, around the routes connecting them, did not locate Gary Mathias. More extensive searches of the broader wilderness area did not locate him. In the decades since 1978, no confirmed remains of Gary Mathias have ever been identified anywhere. He is officially listed as missing. He has never been found. This absence is itself one of the most disturbing elements of the case, because Gary Mathias was described as the most capable of the five. If any of them might have been able to survive the wilderness and make it to help, investigators speculated it might have been Gary. But he did not appear anywhere. He did not reach any road or any settlement. He sent no communication. He was simply gone, in a way that differs from the other 4 men who were found and whose deaths, while unexplained in their causes, were at least documented. Now let us talk about the theories, because investigators and researchers have proposed multiple explanations for the central mystery of the case, which is why the 5 men drove 70 miles in the wrong direction and what happened when they got out of the car. None of these theories are confirmed. Each of them has supporting elements, and each of them has problems. The most commonly discussed theory is that someone directed them. The idea here is that between the convenience store and the mountain road, the 5 men had some kind of interaction with another person or persons who either persuaded or coerced them into driving into the mountains. This could have been another vehicle whose driver they followed, believing they were being guided back toward a familiar road. It could have been a person who got in the car with them. It could have been a threat of some kind that caused them to flee in a direction that took them away from the game and away from home. The appeal of this theory is that it provides a mechanism for what otherwise seems inexplicable behavior. 5 men who knew the route home do not simply drive 70 miles in the wrong direction without some influence acting on them. Something changed between the convenience store and the mountain road. The question is what? The problem with this theory is that no person has ever been identified as having interacted with the 5 men after the convenience store. No witness has come forward. No vehicle has been connected to them. No person with knowledge of what happened has ever spoken. If someone directed those 5 men into the mountains, that person has maintained complete silence for nearly 50 years. Another theory focuses on the basketball game itself. Reports have suggested, though the specifics have been described differently in different accounts, that there may have been some kind of negative interaction at the game between the 5 men and other attendees. Some accounts suggest there was an altercation or a confrontational situation involving people at the game who may have been hostile toward the 5 men. Under this theory, the 5 men were frightened by something that happened at the game or in the parking lot afterward, and they drove away from Chico in a direction that took them away from the perceived threat without regard to whether it was the correct direction home. Fear, particularly acute fear, experienced by people who may not have had extensive experience managing threatening situations, can produce navigation decisions that in retrospect seem irrational, but in the moment reflect a primary drive to create distance from the source of danger. The problem with this theory is that if the 5 men were fleeing a threat and ended up on a mountain road 70 miles away, at some point between Chico and that road, the immediate threat must have ceased to be present. And at that point, what prevented them from turning around and driving back toward Marysville? The car worked. The road they had driven up was the same road they could have driven back down. Something kept them moving forward rather than returning. A third theory is collective disorientation. The idea that the 5 men, after the game, became confused about which direction they were traveling, and that the confusion was not corrected because none of them recognized the roads they were on as wrong. Under this theory, there is no external actor, no threat, no directive, simply a wrong turn taken in the dark after an emotionally charged evening, compounding into a longer and longer deviation as unfamiliar roads continued to be followed in the belief that familiar familiarity was just ahead. This theory has the disadvantage of requiring a very long chain of continued wrong decisions across a significant distance through terrain that becomes increasingly mountainous and obviously different from the flatlands around Marysville. But it cannot be dismissed because collective disorientation in unfamiliar environments is a documented phenomenon, and the men may not have had extensive experience with the mountain roads of the Sierra Nevada. Whatever the reason they were on Bucks Lake Road, the moment the car became stuck in the snow, the situation became critical. At that point, the rational action from an outside perspective is clear. Stay with the car. It is warm, it is visible, it is a known location. Or, if you must move, go back down the road the way you came, back toward lower elevation, back toward towns and people, and help. The five men did neither of these things. They left the car, they went further into the mountains, and that decision, the decision to leave the car and walk 19 miles through snow-covered mountain wilderness in February, is the decision that killed them. Why did they make it? We do not know. One possibility is that Gary Mathias, the most capable of the five, made the decision and the others followed. Gary had military experience. He may have believed that moving was safer than staying. He may have known something about the Forest Service trailer, perhaps having seen it on the drive-in, and believed that reaching it was a viable survival strategy. The trailer was in fact a viable survival option. It had food and heat. The tragedy is that the capacity to use those resources adequately was not present for reasons that remain unknown in the one man who reached it and survived long enough to be found. The Yuba County Five case was investigated at the time and has been revisited many times since. It has been the subject of documentary coverage, podcast episodes, online research communities, and sustained analysis by amateur and professional investigators. None of this attention has produced a definitive explanation. The case file remains open. The official status of the disappearance and deaths is unsolved. Gary Mathias remains listed as missing. What the case leaves behind is grief. The grief of families who lost sons and friends and community members in circumstances that were never explained. The grief of knowing that somewhere in the Plumas National Forest or somewhere beyond it, something happened to five people that no one has ever fully accounted for. And the particular grief of knowing that Ted Wire survived for 13 weeks, that he was alive for 3 months in a shelter with food, that the winter passed around him and he was there, alone, and he died anyway. The case also leaves behind questions about systems of support and care. These were five men who were part of a supported living program. They had networks of people who cared about them. They were not isolated or abandoned in their daily lives. And yet, on that February night, 70 miles from home, in a snowbound mountain forest, they were completely alone. No one knew where they were. No one came in time. The question of whether better systems, better communication, better emergency protocols might have found them sooner is one that communities and researchers have examined in the context of this case. It is not a question with a clean answer, but it is a question worth asking. The Yuba County Five were Gary Mathias, Ted Wire, Jack Madruga, Al Hewitt, and Bill Sterling. They went to a basketball game on February 24th, 1978. They bought snacks at a convenience store. They got in a car, and somewhere between that ordinary moment and a remote forest road in the Sierra Nevada mountains, something happened that has never been explained. 4 of them have been found. 1 of them has not. None of them came home. Thank you for watching Mr. Phantom. If this case stayed with you, subscribe so you do not miss what comes next. Like this video if the mystery of the Yuba County Five left you with questions that have no answers. And the next video on your screen right now is another real story, another group of real people, another set of circumstances that should never have ended the way they did. Every fact verified, every detail real, true stories only. Mr. Phantom.